It is my pleasure to welcome you to the seventh part of the crash course Marketing, Market-Oriented Business Management. This section is on the operational level of marketing and is about pricing. I would like to give you an understanding of pricing and also show you a few methods that you can apply, methods and techniques that you can apply when you have to make pricing decisions. First, the understanding of pricing. And there I would like to go back to the basics, a figure that I've shown you before, especially in the first section of this crash course, when I try to explain what is marketing in general. Here you see the conditions that a margin will function in the long run. We as a company need to have a price that is higher than the cost. Or in other words, the cost need to be lower than the price. The customer needs to have a situation in which the value he gets out of our offering, out of our product, is higher than the price and his or her additional cost. Now it is about where should our price be? How can we define pricing? Pricing contains all the processes and decisions with regard to the price of the product, but more than this, we also look at discounts, delivery terms, and payment terms. And the price can be a lot. You should have a broader view of this. It's a traditional price. You go to the supermarket, get your food out, and there's a price tag on it. But it can also be the rent, fees, wages, commissions, what have you. Important is, pricing is the only instrument of the marketing mix that directly generates revenue. All the others, product, place, promotion, they might indirectly contribute to the revenues through attracting customers. Otherwise, they only produce cost or directly produce cost, whilst pricing directly generates revenue. And the effect of pricing on profit might be substantial, it might be more than you think. Therefore, I would like to give you an example. Let's look at the options that we have here. Option A, we have something, a product, we're selling for £100. Our costs are £80, and we're selling 100 units. That brings us £100 times 100 is £10,000 revenue. £80 times 100 units that we produce gives us cost of £8,000. So we have a profit of £2,000. Now, if we just increase the price by 1%, we charge now £101. Costs still are on 80, and we're still selling 100 units, assuming nothing will change and the customers will not move away. Then our revenue is 10,100. 101 times 100. Cost still on 8,000. And we have now a profit of £2,100. Our profit increased by 5%. That means a 1% increase in price results in a 5% increase in profit. And I hope this calculation makes clear that pricing can have quite a bit of an impact on your overall profit, and as a business manager, that is what you're aiming for. Understand pricing a bit more, and here we touch the field of economics. We have price demand functions. On the x-axis in both graphs is the price, and on the y-axis demand, how much is bought. And you need to look at, do we have an elastic or a rather inelastic demand? On the left-hand side here, you see a rather elastic demand. These are non-essential products. Restaurants, streaming services are examples. All the products in this direction, non-essential. That means if the price goes up, it has a massive impact on the demand. The higher the price, the lower the demand. The lower the price, the higher the demand. More units are sold. In other words, if you're looking from the demand side, more products are bought. But we might have an inelastic demand. that means price changes, do not have a massive impact on the demand, on the buying behavior. These are essential products. Drinking water, life-saving medication. So if you have diabetes, you need your insulin. It doesn't matter what the price is, otherwise you would not survive. And that is something, as a customer, we do not want to have. We are at the mercy of the suppliers of companies. Anyway, going back to the perspective of a business manager, you need to understand what kind of demand you're having there. Rather elastic, rather inelastic. That has an effect how much you can do with the price. Generally speaking, we normally have oligopolistic markets. That means just a few suppliers, a few companies on supply side, and many on the demand side, many customers, potential customers. And in such oligopolistic markets, it is not too important to find the absolutely best price, the absolutely exactly best price. Normally, you will not find this price, but that's not too important. As you see here, the typical oligopolistic price demand function. So with a very low price, the demand reacts very sharply, or with a very high price. Normally, you will be somewhere in this oligopolistic, sometimes called monopolistic price range, and then somewhere along these lines, it is fine with your price. The price does not substantially impact the demand here. So understand this, and for simplicity reasons, quite often, find the price that is okay, and do not invest all your resources in trying to find the exact best price. You won't succeed. Now, that is a rather economic perspective on pricing, meaning the higher the price, the lower the demand. The lower the price, the higher the demand. Now let me give you a more company business oriented approach. And there you might see in a moment, I hope, that pricing should not be overrated, overvalued. On this figure, you see on the x-axis, the price level, low, medium, high. On the y-axis is the product quality, the perceived product quality, again, low, medium, high. Your options are normally, there might be always the odd one out, but normally they're very limited because people associate a low product quality with a low price. And people normally associate a medium product quality with a medium price. And again, a high price is normally associated with a high product quality. Normally, not necessarily, but normally you can only act with regard to pricing in this corridor. And think you buy a super luxurious sports car that costs 5,000 quid. There must be something wrong with this. That is normally the first reaction. So you cannot do much. You have to stay in the price quality perception range. There might be different options, like the discount strategy. Sometimes you're forced to go for a discount strategy. Think of all the private labels within the supermarket chains or the retailers, food retailers you have. What you find in these products, private labels, the discount discount labels and supermarket labels, what you find in there is the same content as you find in the manufacturer brands. There's just the surplus on production that they put in there, but it is labeled as a private label, as a retailer's brand, and therefore customers perceive it as being on a lower quality level, even though objectively it is on the same level as the manufacturer brands, because of the customer perception, you have to stick with a relatively low price, even though objectively you have a high quality. The other option you have is outsmarting the customer. Have a crappy product and charge a very high price. I strongly advise you not to do this. This might work once, but if you have a 2,000 quid handbag and that falls apart after 2 or 3 times wearing it, you will never buy this brand again. More likely you will tell your friends, never buy this. That is the worst thing ever. So outsmarting the customer, not a good idea. Theoretically possible, practically it will never work. Again, to sum this up, for understanding pricing and prices. Normally, the economic perspective is true, or generally speaking, in principle, this is true. Higher prices lead to lower demand, and lower prices lead to higher demand. However, as I hopefully could make clear, the effectiveness of pricing is limited due to the relationship of price and perceived quality. Therefore, be very careful with pricing. Do not fall into the trap, oh, we need to sell more, just get down with the price. Not with this first instinct, quick reaction. Very cautious. You need to be very cautious, look into the market, and then have the pricing in conjunction or integrated within the overall marketing mix so that it fits your brand. I hope I could give you an understanding, perhaps even a feel for pricing. Now I'd like to give you a few pricing methods. Firstly, you should take different perspectives, and that is the players that you have in the market. It's the customers, they have to pay the price. Unfortunately, their competitors, they also have prices, and you need to compete with them. This is why they're called competitors. And your internal perspective, your cost, as your cost should be lower than your pricing. There are more methods. I will introduce you in the next minutes to the Van Westendorp analysis, which is also called price sensitivity meter, going rate pricing, and markup pricing. And the ideal pricing process would be you come from the customer. As I've said this so often, and I hope I do not sound like a broken record. The customer decides if you're successful or not as a company, and if your products and brands are successful or not. Therefore, we should take the customer's perspective first and determine the customer's willingness to pay. Then we should check, are we compatible? Can we compete with our competitors? And thirdly, we should have a look, are our costs lower than our prices? If yes, happy days. If it's the other way around, cost larger than price, not the best idea, and not from a business perspective, not the healthiest. First, let's dive into the Van Westendorp analysis, which is also called price sensitivity meter. We want to determine the willingness to pay for a product, for a brand. So what are the customers willing to pay? That is market research, and we present our product, and then we ask 4 questions. Too expensive. At what price would the product be too expensive so that you would not buy it? Expensive, second variable. At what price would the product be expensive, but you would still consider buying it? Third question, cheap. At what price would the product be a bargain so that it is a good purchase for the money? Finally, too cheap. At what price would the product be too cheap so that you would have doubts about its quality and would not buy it? When you have collected the data, or after you've collected the data, you calculate the cumulative frequencies and invert the functions of cheap to not cheap and expensive to not expensive. Let me come back to the cumulative frequencies, because my experience as a professor and my interaction with students showed me that quite often that is not quite clear what this is. So, a simplified example for the question cumulative frequencies for the question of a variable too cheap. Too cheap, so the price would be so low that I have doubts about I'm doubting the quality, and therefore I would not buy the product. So the blue columns, these are the absolute frequencies. One person said £1 would be too cheap, I would not buy the product. Two people said £2, that is too cheap, I would not buy the product. And then again, £3, one person said I would not buy the product. The maroon columns are the cumulative frequencies. So £1, this is one person there. Now with £2, the cumulative frequency is 3. We have 2 plus the 1 before. Look at this. If £2 are too expensive for these two fellas, then £1, the £1 guy, £2 would also be too expensive, as it is more than 1. So there, the cumulative frequency, cumulate, add all up, is 3. Finally, with £3, one person said 3 is too expensive for me. Now, if the price is 3, then the guys who already said 2 would already be too expensive, and the one who said 1 is already too expensive. £3 would be too expensive for them too. So you add this up, 1 plus 2 plus 1 is 4. The cumulative frequency is 4. I hope I could make clear what cumulative frequencies are. Now to the results of the von Westendorp analysis. You have your 4 variables: too expensive, expensive, cheap, too cheap. Or if you invert these, it's not cheap and not expensive. So too cheap comes from the top down, this line that goes here from 0 to 40,000. Too expensive goes up here from the bottom, from 0 up, again here seen towards the 40,000. Not cheap goes up from the bottom, 0, and goes up the purple line here. And the Royal Air Force blue is not expensive, goes down from top left to bottom right. The important points here in prices are the intersections. As firstly, the maximum and minimum price, and that, or the von Westendorp analysis, you can say I can take any price between the minimum and the maximum price. That is okay. It might not be the perfect price, but I'm fine with this. In this example, it is 14,000. The price for the product should be between 14,000 and 24,000 pounds, something in between. But the analysis gives you a few more hints. Furthermore, you have the indifference price. This is where not cheap and not expensive intersect. At this point, you have a balanced price image. Your brand is not regarded as expensive and is also not regarded as cheap. Therefore, balance price balance, price perception balance, and this is why it's called indifference price. Finally, you have the optimal price point, in this case 17,000 pounds. This optimal price point is where too expensive and too cheap intersect. These are the knockout criteria. Too cheap and I wouldn't buy. Too expensive, so I would not buy. And that means at this price is 17,000, you will reach most customers, or in other words, you would exclude the lowest number of customers because of the price. This is a very strong method, very robust. There are other methods, and I've used this in consulting projects in my good old consulting days, and it was always very impressive, or the clients were very impressed. If you ever have to determine the willingness to pay, think back of the von Westendorp method. Next, going rate pricing. The idea is we follow the prices of the competition. So we look what the competitors are charging, and then we just go on a similar price level. And typically the smaller companies follow the market leader with small markups or discounts, depending on do they want to position themselves rather than the high quality or low quality perception. But generally they follow the market leader. And then you can see, as this example hopefully clarifies, you have the market leader, the Royal Navy blue one, and all the competitors, the Royal Air Force blue, and this is the range where you can set your price for your brand, and then you're going slightly up or slightly down. This is typically done in oligopolistic markets with a strong market leader and in markets in which the products are not very differentiated, like filling stations. I don't think it makes much of a difference if I fill my car in station A or station B. You have also such things in B2B sector, the steel industry. As I said before, go with the willingness to pay first and then sort of double check, are we roughly in line with the competition, how we're standing in comparison to the competition. Finally, there's the markup pricing. That is actually sometimes done in practice, but I recommend you should do this the other way around. Do the markup pricing to check if your costs are lower than your price. However, in practice, that's actually done. We look at the cost and then we put something on top, and that is our price. We have two approaches to work with absorbed cost and base your calculation on variable cost. With absorbed cost, you calculate the absorbed cost per unit, so everything in variable cost and fixed cost, and then you just add up a profit margin. That will be 1 plus profit margin in percent. Give you the example. Let's assume our absorbed cost per unit are £20. We want to have a margin of 10%, then our price will be £22, as 10% of 20 is 2. If we base our pricing on variable cost, we leave the fixed cost out, because quite often we do not know how much we are selling and how we can distribute the fixed cost onto our products. So we look at the contribution margin. Then it's our price equals the variable cost per unit times 1 plus the contribution margin in percent. Again, an example. Let's assume our variable costs are £10. We want to have a contribution margin of 20%. 20% of £10 is £2. Then our price would be £12. Pricing can become a bit more complex, and there we come to price differentiation. It would be lovely to charge every customer, or each customer, what he or she is specifically willing to pay. So the one pays £3, one pays £2, and from another we might even get £4 for a product. But this is easier said than done. However, it happens and can be done. For instance, customer-related price differentiations. Think of a museum. Kids and retirees, they get lower prices, whilst adults pay the normal price. Time-related differentiation. Look at what airlines are doing. If you book very early, you have a low price. If you book rather late, close to your date of travel, you pay higher prices. And then last minute, sort of book 2 hours before your flight goes, and you're lucky that there's still some unbooked seats, you get again a very low price. And finally, geographical pricing might be the food industry, also air travel, you find this. And here what you normally do is low income countries, they have lower prices, whilst high income countries have higher prices. One example is the Big Mac Index here of January 2025. What do you have to pay for a Big Mac? And in Switzerland, it's $7.99, whilst in the Philippines, it's $2.89. And again, living in Switzerland, I would not recommend you to order a Big Mac for less money from the Philippines and have it shipped in. Probably, even though it's not possible, probably not too healthy when the Big Mac arrives. By the way, the Big Mac Index is used by some economists to determine the purchasing power of countries and the economic wealth. It has been criticized, but I hope this example made clear how you can geographically discriminate prices or differentiate your prices. Now, what's with discounts? Discounts, there's some reduction in your pricing. This might be early payment or cash discounts. If you pay now, I'll give you 10% off. There might be volume, quantity discounts. All right, 2 for 1. I find sometimes in restaurants, 2 dishes you pay only for the more expensive one. Loyalty discounts with loyalty cards and such things. Always you see quite often time and seasonal discounts. Summer sale, winter sale, such events like Black Friday. These things you can use. And they are very good to use for attracting new customers. And it can also increase the volume that your current customers are purchasing. But, that's a very big but, there are massive risks. And I can tell you that the research, the literature, comes to different results. Studies come to different results if it helps or if it doesn't help, if it rather harms the company. Now, the risks. Customers might only change the time when they buy. I would like to buy a new car. I would buy it next month. Now there's a discount on, so I just buy it now. I would have paid the full price, but because the discount is on, I buy it now. So what you've achieved with a discount is only changing the time of purchase. Customers might also shift their demand within your product portfolio. And then they're only buying the discounted products, and your normal priced products are not bought. And what is really worse, if you get discounts in too often, then the customers might expect discounts and they wait and only buy when there is a discount, and you can only sell discounted products anymore. So be really careful. Use discounts, but with caution, and definitely do not use them too often. Finally, for this section, what can you do with market entry pricing? How do you go into a market? And how can you adopt your price? So for market entry pricing, you have, if you put this into categories, 3 options. You go in with a high price, you go in with a market price, and with a low price. Going in with a high price, that is called skimming pricing. The idea is you want to win the early adopters. When you go in with a new product, the early adopters, you make a profit margin. This profit margin you reinvest into your market cultivation. And then when your market becomes a mass market, going out of the niche of the early adopters and changing into a mass market, you go down with a price to attract, let's say, the normal people and sell to them. The risk here is that your early adopters, your hardcore supporters, your hardcore fans, they might feel betrayed because they're actually writing reviews. They're probably in the internet. They're probably giving you feedback. Why should the average Joe pay a lower price than the hardcore enthusiast? So be careful there. You might estrange, or your hardcore supporters might become estranged. On the other end, penetration pricing. You go in with a very low price, new product, very low price, and you try to quickly acquire a large market share. You're not looking at profits at the start too much. Then, when you have a large market share, you raise your price to make a profit, then to milk your market share that you have. Again here, sounds good on paper, but it is risky. Because it is very hard to get rid of a low price image. And the customers might associate your brand with a low price. And as I said, it's very hard to get rid of this. And if you raise the price at one point, you might lose all of your customers. Having said this, I recommend, unless you're an expert in pricing and you have the resources to monitor what's going on in the market, don't go with skimming and don't go with penetration pricing. Great strategies might work. For a small and medium-sized company or enterprise, be careful. Go in with market pricing. The price you want to have in the long run, that is what you call from the start. You might even trick into some trick in quotation marks and some sort of penetration pricing through market pricing. You write on your product, that is £10. But for the first 2 weeks, there's a market entry reduction of £2. So everybody knows that product is worth or valued at £10. I should be quick, then I can get a great bargain and pay only £8. That might be a trick if you want to go for the pseudo or quasi penetration pricing approach. Now, price adoptions. You have to look at a few points. Are you initiating the price change? And are you reacting to price changes? Again, think of what I've told you about calculating the price. Have the perspective. What is the willingness to pay? How are we standing in comparison in comparison to the other companies, to our competitors, and how are our costs looking with regard to the price? Then which direction do we go? Is it price cuts or price raises? And as I said, what are the effects of price changes? What are the effects on the demand side? So the customer, how will the customer react? Also think of the elastic and inelastic demand I introduced earlier. How will the competitors behave? And what will it do to our revenue and our profit? That was the section of price or pricing. The next time it is about place, the distribution of your brands, your products, goods or services. Until then, I wish you all the best, and it is bye-bye for now.